Hi, I'm Mike Brannon. Today I want to talk about warm hemolytic anemia, from the diagnosis to the treatments to where I'm at today currently with this disease. It was in October of 2022 that I retired from the company after 35 years, and I was living in Minnesota, and we had decided to move to Missouri in March of 2023 to be closer to our family, closer to our grandkids. To this point, I had been as healthy as could be. I had never had any serious medical issues. Other than the flu or a cold, I feel great all the time. Well, when we got to Missouri, I thought it would be a good idea to find a new doctor, have a physical. I was wanting to start a part-time job just to keep myself busy. And so I thought a physical would be a good idea. So I saw a doctor in Missouri, and after the physical, I was told that I have high ferritin levels in my blood. Ferritin is a protein that causes our bodies to hold on to iron, and so we end up with excessive iron in our blood. I was not really concerned. The doctor told me this wasn't a big concern. It could certainly be treated, and the way they would treat that would be through phlebotomy, or also known as bloodletting. They would take blood from my body, and as the body regenerated new blood, that the ferritin levels should decrease at that time. So I wasn't really worried, I wasn't concerned. So they had asked me to come back, I think it was 2 weeks, and they would start these phlebotomy treatments with me. So in the meantime, I had taken on a part-time job. I was feeling really good. And so I went in for my first phlebotomy treatment, and I remember them asking me, after running some tests, had I been bleeding, or had I noticed any bleeding in my body or anywhere from my body? And I told them I had not, and they told me they were puzzled because where I had too much iron in my body, now I was actually showing or demonstrating signs of anemia. And so when you're anemic, they obviously can't take that blood from your body, you just don't have enough of it. And so I remember thinking, that's interesting, but they kind of played it off. I wasn't really concerned, and they told me that they would run further tests, and that when they had some results, they'd give me a call. So I remember it was, I don't know, probably a week later, and I was at work one day, and I was loading my truck, and I noticed that I was feeling really fatigued. I was feeling really tired, and also that I was having a hard time catching my breath. There was a lot of shortness of breath, and I thought maybe I was just coming down with the flu or the cold or something. But it was even noticed by other people that were working around me that day. They'd asked me if I was feeling okay because I was sweating, looked a little pale, and so they were asking how I felt, and I said, I don't feel real good, but I think it's just a flu. We'll try to push through the day, and we'll see how I feel at the end of the day. And it was at that time, that later on that afternoon, that I was working about midway through my route, and I remember feeling really tired. I remember it was getting worse. It was definitely getting worse. And I received a call from my doctor at that time, and she asked me rather, where are you at and what are you doing? And I told her that I'm at work and I'm about halfway through my route. And she said, well, I need you to stop what you're doing immediately, and I need you to get to a hospital as soon as possible. She said, I've made arrangements with a hospital in Kansas City, and you should get there as soon as you can. And I remember feeling a little concerned at the urgency that she was demonstrating. And so I remember asking her if she could explain a little bit about what's going on, and she said she really would rather that I stopped and got myself to the hospital as soon as possible. She would explain everything later. And I remember I returned the truck back to the yard, and I went home, and my wife immediately took me to Kansas City, and they admitted me really quick into the hospital. Once I was in the hospital, I remember they started immediately with monitoring my vitals. They hooked me up to these heart monitors and this and that. And they started an IV, and they were explaining that they needed to get this stuff done. They wanted to see how things were working in my body and all of this other stuff. And I remember feeling really anxious about what was going on, because it just seems like they were rushing to get things done. And so about that time, my doctor came into the room, and she explained that the urgency was brought on by a low hemoglobin level. And I had no idea what hemoglobin was, so she explained to me that the hemoglobin is a protein that's found inside of our red blood cells. It's primarily responsible for carrying oxygen to different parts of our body, through the blood, and it's also used to return carbon dioxide back to our lungs. Well, this had dropped significantly in the level, and so what they had done was they started an IV that she explained was called wAIHA, and they put it through an IV. And what that is, it's really just a concentrated dose of antibodies that they introduce to your body, and it's used to treat immune deficiency disorders. And so I still really didn't have an idea what was going on, but I knew that what they found had to be serious because of the way that everything was going so quickly. It was moving so fast, and I was feeling pretty scared. I remember that. And I remember praying, and that was the only thing that really brought me kind of a calmness that I was experiencing, a little more calmness, and the fact that my wife was working really hard to kind of try to get rid of some of that anxiety to help me calm down. Once I calmed down, I was able to really listen to what they were saying, and the diagnosis, it sounded complicated, but at the same time, it was comforting because they began to they helped me understand exactly what was going on in my body. And of course, you know, I'm feeling like this is something, am I dying today? They reassured me that I was not dying, not today anyway. So that helped to kind of alleviate some of that anxiety. So finally, after several minutes and after getting the IV and everything started, my doctor actually told me the diagnosis, and what the diagnosis would be warm hemolytic anemia. And what that is, that's a rare blood disease that occurs when our red blood cells are destroyed much faster than our bone marrow can replace them. It's almost like your body is attacking your red blood cells. They see it as the enemy. And so this hemolytic anemia, it can develop quickly or slowly. It can be mild, it can be life-threatening, but it's a simple explanation, but I found it to be comforting once I knew what was going on. So I found out that 1 to 3 people out of every 100,000 are affected by this disease. So it's a very rare blood disease. A lot of the symptoms I was told and later experienced after getting out of the hospital was there's fatigue, you can be pale skin, shortness of breath, dizziness. And when we talk about the fatigue that's associated with this disease, I want to stress that it's not your ordinary fatigue. You know, if someone had asked me to define fatigue prior to my diagnosis, I would say that fatigue was being really tired. You come home from work, a hard day at work, you got the grass to cut. I could muster that energy, even though I was fatigued, I could muster that energy to get out there and cut the grass and get the things done that I needed to get done. But after my diagnosis, after I left the hospital and began to experience living with this disease, the fatigue I would define today as debilitating, to a point that wanting to get up and take a shower, not having the energy to do that, not having the energy to make a meal or to get up to even eat a meal, it's zero energy. You can't muster up any kind of energy to get the things done that you want to get done. And when you do move around, the shortness of breath that comes with it just creates even more anxiety. And so the shortness of breath combined with this new defined fatigue and with the anxiety, it was debilitating, to say the least. And so once I was discharged from the hospital, and I think that was around January 16th, I tried to stay busy, but I couldn't. There was nothing I could do without experiencing this shortness of breath and this extreme fatigue. And it was frustrating because I'm not someone that likes to sit around and do nothing, but I just felt like nothing they were doing were working. I'd had the IVIG, I'd had high doses of steroid, prednisone. I was up to, at that time, I think I was doing 100 milligrams a day of prednisone. And it wasn't doing anything that made me feel better. And so my wife at that time was doing all that she could to keep me connected with my daily life and my family, but it just wasn't working. And then with the prednisone and the high doses, it makes you want to eat everything you see. And so I started to put on a lot of weight, and that didn't help. I wasn't feeling any better. I actually started to feel a little depressed, because with certain diseases, they can give you treatments that will immediately make you feel better. With this disease, it's not that way. You don't immediately feel better. You take treatment after treatment, and you hope that one of those treatments are going to kick in. But it was, I think in February 2024, that they weren't seeing any improvements. And so they told me now, along with the IVIG that I received in the hospital, the high doses of steroids that I was on every day, and now they were going to start a new drug called rituximab, which I would receive infusions of that once a day for 4 weeks. And so I started getting these rituximab treatments, but again, my hemoglobin was staying where a healthy person would have a level 15 hemoglobin. Mine was still in the 9s, somewhere around 9. So they were not getting the results they were looking for. So now I continued the rituximab for 4 weeks, and then they put me back on, or kept me on the high steroids. Again, not feeling any better. Nothing was getting any better. And so it was at this time, I believe, that I was introduced to wAIHA Warriors. And I was introduced through my son-in-law, who had done a bunch of research to try and figure out who or where can we find out more information on what exactly is going on. You know, certainly there had to be somebody out there that was dealing with this. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people because it's a rare blood disease. And so we were lucky enough to find wAIHA Warriors. And so after some more research, we found that they were actually going to meet in a couple of weeks in Nashville for, I believe it was their second annual conference. And in this conference would be experts or scientists, there would be patients, there would be people who advocate for this disease, there would be people that could really help you understand what it is you're dealing with. And so fortunately for us, they were kind enough to let us, at such late notice, kind enough to allow us to be part of that conference. And so my wife and I drove to Nashville, where we met with this group on a Saturday. And it was amazing. It was amazing in the sense that I could meet other patients who were going through the same frustrations I were. You know, we were suffering from this dizziness, we were suffering from lightheadedness, there was anxiety contributed to that, we were suffering from fatigue and from the shortness of breath. And so I could hear their experiences and compare them with my experience. So we could talk about doctors and treatments and what they were doing. And then we were able to hear from experts, researchers, scientists that were waist deep, knee deep, or neck deep in trying to find cures and trying to find treatments for this disease. So we came away from that weekend very encouraged. And one of the things I have to say that encouraged me the most was the way they showed a respect and an importance for the caregivers. Because it's important when you're suffering from this disease, the fatigue, the shortness of breath, and the things all associated with this disease make life unbearable. You just can't do the things you want to do. You need someone that's going to help you prepare meals, someone that's going to help you take a shower, someone that's going to help you stay connected. Caregivers are essential to people with this disease, and they really showed the utmost respect, and they gave our caregivers, my wife in this case, an opportunity to meet with other caregivers. How is your life being interrupted by this disease with this person that you care about or that you love? And to meet these other caregivers and to see these people giving so generously with their time and just showing the kind of care for the patients was amazing. And so we came away from that weekend really, really encouraged. And I encourage anybody that's been recently diagnosed or is going through treatments from this disease to contact wAIHA Warriors and find out how you can become involved or how you can meet with these people or get involved in the conferences they do. But just get involved and learn all you can about this disease. It will help alleviate the anxiety and help alleviate all the things that you experience through your treatments. It will give you an opportunity to talk to people that are sharing the same thing you're going through. So about this time, my disease had some of the drugs were showing slight improvement, but not a lot. And I remember it was at this time that I met with my hematologist at the time, and she told me that she'd be leaving her practice and that I would have to meet with her partner. And at this time, my first meeting with him was a little disappointing because I remember one of the first things he says, we're not seeing the results we want to see with this, Mike. And so we're talking about removing your spleen. That's been known to help. Immediately I thought, no, I'm not losing a body part. You know, it just seemed, after meeting with the folks at wAIHA in Nashville, I'd heard some talk about losing their spleen and that they really didn't see any significant improvement after that. And I was told by some, you know, to make sure you don't do that. Make that a last resort, in other words. So I told the doctor, essentially, that I was opting out of that wasn't going to be an option to remove my spleen. And so at that point, I asked for a second opinion, and it was then that I was introduced to my current hematologist that I have today, and she's fantastic. She gave me a sense of confidence with her knowledge and her understanding and her ability to articulate what it is the disease does and how we can effectively treat that disease. It really made me feel a lot better. And at the time, before meeting with wAIHA, before going to Nashville, they had also put me on this drug called CellCept, which is a drug that helps people who have had transplants to stop the rejection of that certain organ in their body. So this drug was helping with that, I guess, in certain systems. They thought maybe it would help with what I was experiencing. Well, after a few meetings with my new hematologist, she assured me they would not be taking my spleen out and that I would be taken off the CellCept immediately. So I don't know that if it was this new confidence I had in her, or maybe that this rituximab or the IVIG or the steroids were finally taking effect, but I began to feel much better. I began to be able to move without becoming short of breath. I began to feel more energy and not so fatigued. So something in my body was happening. At that time, I remember that my levels were going up to like 11 and 12. I was feeling like we were making progress. And so at that point, she began to slowly remove me off of the prednisone, the high rate of steroids. And within a few weeks, I was off the prednisone altogether, the steroids. I was not having any more treatments, and I was feeling really good. They kept using the word remission, and I was getting excited, because it felt like I was in that point. I was in remission from this disease. So with everything going on the way it was, I was feeling really encouraged. I was finally starting to get back into my life when all of a sudden I began to have other symptoms, and that was my face would turn purple in the cold. My fingertips would turn purple. I would get in the middle of the day or the middle of the night, I would get chills that could only be alleviated by a warm blanket out of a dryer. My wife would wrap a warm blanket around me. So I asked my hematologist, is this related to the warm hemolytic anemia? After further testing, they found out that I had CAD, which is a cold agglutinin hemolytic anemia, which is the cold side to the warm. So where it's rare to have a disease like warm hemolytic anemia, it's even rarer to have both. And I won the lottery, I guess, because I ended up having both. But I don't want to go into a lot of the cold side, because really what we're talking about today is the warm hemolytic anemia and the effects of that. So after finding out I had that, there was really no other treatment for that other than what I'd already done, and that was the IVIG, the rituximab, or the high rate of steroids. So it was in December of 2024 that I was pretty much symptom-free. I was not experiencing any of the shortness of breath, the fatigue, the dizziness, the pale skin, any of that. And even the cold side had began to, by itself, it seemed like, just take care. And that could be from the treatments I had had earlier. I'm not really sure. But all in all, I felt like I was in remission and I felt good. Just at that point, and that's not the end of the story, it was just recently, just 2 weeks ago on a Friday, that I was at home doing a study with my wife in the morning, when all of a sudden I got really nauseated, I got dizzy, and I passed out. She called 911. I was then rushed to the hospital, and at that point in the hospital, I actually just recently coded. I was coded for 3 minutes. They not sure why my heart stopped, but it had stopped. Fortunately for me, and thankfully for the grace of God, I was revived. And after I was revived, it determined that my heart needed a pacemaker to stay healthy. And so I say all of this only to say that after I received the pacemaker, which now I feel fantastic, I asked my doctor if this could be related to any of the warm hemolytic anemia, the cold agglutinin, or any of the treatments. Could any of this be related? And they told me that none of that can be, it could be possible, it couldn't, we wouldn't know until we could run further testing. And unfortunately, I can't have any tests done with the pacemaker, the MRIs and the PET scans and all that until after this has an opportunity to heal. So I'm at least 6 weeks away from receiving any kind of test that will tell us or explain why this happened. And I only mention it because I don't know if this is related to the hemolytic anemia. I don't know. But I do know that if you have warm hemolytic anemia, you should reach out. Reach out to people who have had it. Reach out to other patients. Reach out to the doctors, the researchers. Get an idea of what exactly is going on with your body and do the treatments that they tell you about. But don't be afraid to question those treatments. And find a good doctor, someone that you think that has a good understanding of the disease. Because once you understand what's going on with your body, once you understand the treatments and what those treatments are doing to heal your body of this, you can then begin to relax. The anxiety will kind of go away. And remember that the shortness of breath and the fatigue, that's all only for a while until you get with the right person with the right treatments. But it's important to reach out and have a good caregiver. And that's what this video, or what I'm doing, I just wanted to share with you my experience. And there's so many others out there with their experience and what they've gone through with this disease. But reach out and remember that there are people out there willing to help, people out there that will help you through this disease. Don't try to do it alone. So I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you. If I can do anything or answer any questions, I'm on Facebook. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.